It was one of those nights that seemed endless, where the cold bites deeper than hunger, and the city feels like it's holding its breath. Rain slid down the cracked windows of a quiet mansion on the hill, while far below, in the dark alleys of the same city, a young girl wandered alone. Her name was Mia, 16, thin, wrapped in a soaked blanket that barely clung to her shoulders. She had once dreamed of becoming a teacher, but dreams fade fast when the streets become your home. She hadn't eaten in 2 days. Her shoes were torn, her hair matted by the storm. Each step she took splashed in the shallow pools of cold rainwater that mirrored the broken lights above. Somewhere ahead, she saw the faint glow of a grand estate, tall gates, marble walls, and manicured lawns that seemed untouched by misery. She stopped there, staring through the iron bars at what looked like another world. Inside, a row of kennels set behind the mansion, each warm, clean, and dry. The dogs had better shelter than she did. So she did something no one could have expected. She fell to her knees in front of the gate, her voice trembling as she whispered to no one in particular a prayer, a plea. "Please," she murmured under her breath, clutching her chest as lightning cracked overhead. "Just one night, even if it's in a doghouse, just somewhere dry, somewhere safe." And somehow, someone heard her. High above, standing on his balcony, Ethan Cole, a self-made millionaire, watched the storm. To the world, he was the definition of success, owner of multiple tech companies, a man who could buy anything. But to himself, he was empty, a soul too busy chasing numbers to remember what warmth felt like. He'd lost his wife 3 years ago in a car accident, and though his mansion was full of light, his heart had long gone dim. He didn't notice the seasons anymore, nor the rain, nor the people who lived beneath the shadow of his wealth. Until that night, as thunder rolled across the city, Ethan saw a faint shape moving near his gates, a small figure kneeling in the rain. At first, he thought it was a stray animal, but then she lifted her head, and even from a distance, he could see her face. A child, alone, trembling. He felt something stir inside him, something he hadn't felt in years. Ethan went downstairs and stepped outside. The air was sharp, filled with the scent of wet earth and cold metal. When he reached the gate, the girl's eyes widened in fear, but he didn't speak. He just watched her, and for a long moment, time itself seemed to hold still. There was something about her, the way she clutched that blanket, the way her lips trembled between desperation and dignity. Then he noticed where her gaze kept drifting toward the row of doghouses behind him, and in that instant, he understood. He didn't ask her name, nor how she got there. He simply opened the gate. The iron creaked. Rain poured harder. He pointed toward the nearest kennel, dry, warm, covered in straw. Without a word, she bowed her head and walked slowly in, her small figure disappearing into the dim shelter. That night, Ethan couldn't sleep. For the first time in years, he lay awake not thinking about business or profit, but about a girl sleeping in his doghouse. The next morning, sunlight spilled across the marble floor like gold. Ethan walked out to check the kennels. The dogs barked playfully as usual, but in the far corner, where the smallest house stood, Mia was awake. She was sitting on the ground, gently petting one of the dogs, smiling faintly. It was the first time he had seen that smile, fragile, almost invisible, yet radiant in its own way. Her eyes lifted when she saw him, and for a brief second, shame filled her gaze. She tried to stand, apologizing softly, but her legs gave way beneath her. Ethan didn't say a word. He went back inside and returned minutes later with a tray bread, eggs, a cup of milk. He placed it near her without speaking. She stared at it, disbelief flooding her face. He turned to leave, but before he did, she whispered a single word, "Thank you." It was barely audible, but it was enough. Days passed. Every evening, Ethan noticed the same thing: the girl returning to the edge of his property, always waiting until nightfall to sneak into the kennel. He pretended not to notice, but every night, he left a plate of food on the back porch, and every morning, it was gone. Something strange began to happen. The mansion, once unbearably silent, now felt alive. He found himself waiting for that quiet sound, the faint creak of the kennel door, the soft padding of her bare feet. It reminded him of something he'd lost: a sense of purpose. But one night, the weather worsened. The sky roared and lightning struck dangerously close. Ethan watched from his window as the wind tore through the garden. He rushed outside, fearing for his dogs, and for her. When he reached the kennels, he found the roof of one had partially collapsed under the rain. Inside, Mia was trying to shield one of the dogs with her own body. Coughing, soaked, and shivering violently, without hesitation, Ethan picked her up and carried her inside. She was burning with fever. He laid her on the couch near the fire, wrapped her in blankets, and stayed beside her the entire night, changing damp towels, feeding her spoonfuls of warm soup, waiting until her breathing steadied. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan prayed, not for wealth, not for power, but for the life of a stranger. When Mia woke up, sunlight was streaming through the windows. For a moment, she thought she was dreaming, lying on a soft couch, surrounded by warmth. Then she saw him, the same man from the night before, sitting quietly with a cup of tea. Their eyes met, and though no words were spoken, something unspoken passed between them, a promise, perhaps, or understanding. He motioned toward the breakfast laid out for her. She hesitated, then slowly began to eat. Each bite felt like a miracle. Ethan watched her in silence. He saw the scars on her hands, the faint bruises, the mark of life's cruelty, and he wondered how many others like her were out there, unseen, forgotten, just waiting for a sliver of mercy. Over the following days, Mia regained her strength. She started helping around the mansion, sweeping, feeding the dogs, even watering the plants. Ethan never asked her to. She simply did it out of gratitude, and though she spoke little, her silence spoke volumes. One evening, while she was folding laundry near the fireplace, she finally told him her story. Her parents had died in a fire 2 years ago. She had lived with an aunt who only saw her as a burden. One night, the woman locked her out, saying she was old enough to survive on her own. And so she did, barely. Ethan listened quietly. His chest ached. In her story, he saw reflections of his own pain, the loss, the loneliness, the nights spent questioning fate. Days turned into weeks, and the mansion began to feel different. Mia's laughter, soft, shy, echoed in its once empty halls. The dogs followed her everywhere, their tails wagging like they, too, had found new joy. Ethan's employees began to notice the change in their boss. The man who once spoke only in numbers now smiled at sunsets, lingered at breakfast, and often stood by the window, watching the girl who had once begged to sleep in his doghouse. He realized something simple, yet profound. Compassion had returned his humanity. One afternoon, a government car pulled up at the gate. A social worker stepped out, holding a file. She had been searching for Mia for months. Someone had reported a missing child. Ethan's heart sank. He feared they would take her away. But the woman smiled kindly. She explained that Mia had no surviving relatives and had been living on the streets since her aunt abandoned her. Ethan stood silent for a long time, then quietly said, "She has a home now." He signed the papers to become her legal guardian, and when Mia found out, she wept uncontrollably, clinging to him with gratitude that words could never express. Time passed. Mia went back to school. She excelled, not because life had become easy, but because she finally believed in tomorrow. Ethan attended her school events, cheering louder than anyone else. The mansion that had once echoed with silence now rang with laughter, barking dogs, and the sound of piano keys because Mia had taught herself to play. Every morning, she left a small note on Ethan's desk before going to class. Simple words, written with love. "Thank you for saving me." He kept every one of them. Years later, Mia grew into a young woman, confident, graceful, and full of empathy. She graduated with honors, dedicating her speech to the man who showed her what true kindness means. Ethan sat in the front row, tears quietly filling his eyes. He realized that he hadn't just saved her life, she had saved his too. Sometimes, life puts people in our path for reasons we may never understand. At first, Ethan had all the wealth the world could offer, yet he was poorer in spirit than anyone he knew, until a homeless girl reminded him of what truly mattered. And Mia, who once begged for a place in a doghouse, found herself in a home built not from marble and glass, but from compassion. Kindness costs nothing, yet it's the rarest treasure in this world. You never know whose life you might change with one act of empathy, or how deeply that act might change your own. So the next time you see someone in need, remember this story, a girl who only wanted to stay dry for one night, and of a man who learned that sometimes the richest hearts are found in the humblest souls. Because, in the end, it wasn't the mansion, or the wealth, or the luxury that made Ethan's life full again. It was a simple, selfless choice to open a gate and let kindness in. And that changed everything.